Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
You're watching Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Earlier in the year, bilateral ties between Malaysia and Australia were elevated to Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, or CSP, and this from a strategic partnership that we've had with Australia since November of 2015. Now, what does this diplomatic nomenclature mean for the relationship between our two countries? Joining us on the show tonight to discuss this further, we have His Excellency Andrew Goledzinowski. I hope I said that correctly. He's the High Commissioner of Australia to Malaysia. Welcome to the show, Andrew. It's good to have you here.
Thank you, Melisa. It's a pleasure to be on.
What exactly does this comprehensive strategic partnership mean in terms of cooperation between our two countries, Andrew? I'm hoping that you could lay it out for us, because it feels like, as I just mentioned, diplomatic nomenclature, quite a broad partnership. But in terms of real cooperation, what does that mean?
Yeah, well, it really is a landmark. The challenge in a relationship like Australia has with Malaysia, which is a mature partnership and it's deep and broad and it's a very good relationship, is what more can you do to bring value? And that's what this does. The nomenclature is a little bit awkward, but it's important because in the case of Australia, we only have a handful of countries with whom we've concluded agreements at this level. And in the case of Malaysia, there's only one other country with whom Malaysia has a comprehensive strategic partnership. So it's a big deal in diplomatic terms. It's underpinned by a work program which is detailed and comprehensive, and I won't go into all of it here, but essentially breaks down into three areas. Areas where we think we can enhance each other's prosperity. Secondly, where we can dialogue around issues of security. And thirdly, areas where we can cooperate in social and technological advancement. And under that, all sorts of things come. Everything from cybersecurity to improving our halal meat partnership through to maritime dialogue. So, there's a great deal which is encompassed in this.
Andrew, can you explain to us the timing of this decision to raise the level of the partnership? And has it to do with Malaysia's evolving relationship with China?
Hi, Sharaad. Well, partly it's to do with the fact that it's 5 years, as Melisa pointed out, since we elevated our relationship to a strategic dialogue. So we want to keep moving things forward. Secondly, last year when this process began, and it takes a while to get these agreements up, it was an important year in our relationship. It was the 65th year of bilateral diplomatic relations between Malaysia and Australia. It was also an important anniversary of the end of World War II and the Sandakan death marches and the cauldron of war in which the two countries came closer together. So a lot of it is around those dates. And as I said, it's also about taking a relationship which already is very good and making sure that we refresh it periodically and not take it for granted.
Right. So, as you mentioned, Malaysia has only one other country that we have this comprehensive strategic partnership, and that's with China. I'm wondering if, this is going to be kind of a roadmap for bilateral ties, bilateral cooperation in the coming years. Specifically, would that mean an increased level of consultation when it comes to regional and global affairs? And how would that play into Australia's relationship with ASEAN?
Right. Well, if you've read the Australian Foreign Policy White Paper from a few years ago, which I'm sure you have, Melisa, you'll know that ASEAN is very much at the heart of Australia's regional outlook, and Malaysia is at the heart of ASEAN. So it makes perfect sense that we're focused exactly where we are focused. The dialogue will be particularly enhanced because one of the key elements to this agreement is for annual leaders level meetings. Now, as a practical matter, our leaders have met more or less annually forever anyway, just because of the the nature of our relationship and the many forums at which they meet. But this formalises that. And underneath that comes a range of other activities, foreign minister meetings, trade minister meetings. There's a new mechanism for senior trade officials to meet regularly to further improve our economic cooperation. So there's a great deal involved in this, which goes very much to our relationship with ASEAN. And it goes very much also to contemporary problems. So, for example, we haven't forgotten about the fact that we're still emerging from a global pandemic. Vaccine cooperation is a very important part of what we're doing in ASEAN and with Malaysia.
Andrew, I'd just like to circle back to the question of China and the ways in which this particular partnership might impact Malaysia's own level or modalities of engagement with China over everything from the South China Sea issue to Chinese investments in the country. Does Australia view China essentially as a rival in the region? And to what extent is Australia trying to balance that out by raising the level of cooperation with countries like Malaysia?
Let me put it this way, Sharaad. China is Australia's largest trading partner. So no country in the region has benefited more from the rise of China than Australia. So as far as we're concerned, that is a good thing. And we know that Malaysia is in a similar situation where China is Malaysia's largest trading partner as well. So that's to one side. But as Malaysia often says, our aim is to be friends with everybody, and you can't have too many friends in the world. Our relationship with Malaysia stands very much on its merits. As I said at the beginning, it's an incredibly broad relationship. It goes well beyond just trade and investment. We count ourselves as one of Malaysia's top partners when it comes to security, military cooperation, policing, education, of course, trade always, agricultural cooperation, a broad range of things. I'm hoping that what we will be doing with Malaysia going forward will build on all of that, and it'll be complementary to what Malaysia does with other countries, not necessarily competitive. Although where it gives Malaysia fresh options to do things, then that's a good thing. You know, Sharaad, sometimes competition isn't a bad thing either. And when it's a positive and constructive competition, then hopefully everyone benefits.
Okay, so yes, you're right. Can't have too many friends, especially in diplomatic circles. But how does this tie in, Andrew, with the recently revived the quadrilateral security dialogue? So the US and three of its critical allies in Asia Pacific, Japan, India, and Australia now reviving the Quad, which was set up, I think, back in 2007 as a figurative bulwark against China's or perceived threats of China towards the region. But then, if I'm not mistaken, the Quad went dormant after a while because of the rise in this trade partnership between Australia and China. How do we think about now the Quad being back and Australia's position with Australia's partnership with the US in this alliance, and perhaps containing China and the perceived threats of China?
Well, Melisa, we're delighted that the Quad is back, as you put it, that it's now been lifted to the level of leaders, and the leaders have met once and they've undertaken to meet again face to face before the end of the year. The Quad is a very positive development in the region. It's in a way a natural kind of a partnership. It seems entirely obvious that countries with so much in common, liberal democracies, the four of us, would want to meet and cooperate more closely. The areas where the Quad is particularly looking at, I think, underlines what a positive agenda it has. So the recent summit, it committed to working more closely on three particular areas, one of which, again, is combating coronavirus, and in particular doing so through enhanced vaccine cooperation. Secondly, it was climate change, which is an issue which is of first order importance to all the countries of this region. And thirdly was the broader strategic security, strategic materials and technologies. All of that is included. So it is a positive thing, and I think broadly it'll be seen that way by the countries of the region.
Andrew, you know, of the four, perhaps India now doesn't represent liberal democracy. Under Narendra Modi, it's fairly illiberal in its outlook. So, but we'll leave that for another conversation, perhaps with the High Commissioner from India. I do want to ask you, Andrew, though, you know, the reality on the ground is that the US has provided a security architecture for the region since the early 50s, hasn't it? ANZUS Treaty being one of them. Is this a continuation of that? The assumption that the US must be the superpower underpinning that architecture, and that China is an existential threat to it?
Sharaad, I know what you're saying. I'm always a bit suspicious of dichotomies which sort of draw the lines as heavily as you've done. China is a rising power which has legitimate interests in the region, and its voice has to be heard. There's no question about that. If anybody thought the Quad was about containment, then Australia would be the first to say that it isn't, and it can't be. Having said that, the role of the US in the region, as you say, has underpinned a period of unprecedented security, peace, and prosperity for this region. And we think that's a good thing. We want to see that continue. The fact that we're working together in this quadrilateral context, it's interesting. People don't know whether to say that it's something which is ephemeral and it'll disappear like sea foam, someone said, or that it's the new Asian NATO. So it clearly can't, both things can't be true, right? So we will see what the Quad does. And I think it'll be judged largely by what it achieves in practical terms for the region. So I think that'll be interesting to see how that goes moving forward. But people don't comment on other regional groupings like the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. They don't include Australia, and that's fine. You know, as long as their agenda is positive and they work in an open and transparent way, we welcome all of that.
All right, so Andrew, we're going to have you back maybe further down the line to see how the Quad is panning out, whether it is in fact an Asian NATO, but the early days still will have to have you back to see what happens. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. We appreciate your time being on the show. Thank
you, Melisa. Thank you, Sharaad.
We're going to take a quick break on Consider This, but we will be back with more, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. With me is Sharaad Kuttan. Joining us on the show now, we have Azmi Hassan, who's a geostrategist at University of Technology, Malaysia. Azmi, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's continue this conversation we've been having about Australia's role within the region, given all the different developments that we've seen with Myanmar, with ASEAN centrality, and now with the Quad that went dormant and now is back, the quadrilateral security dialogue. So where do you see Australia's role within this region, given all the moving parts that has happened in the past year or so?
Yeah, Melisa, I think Australia will be playing a very critical part on this part of the world. If you mentioned just now the quadrilateral framework security dialogue, the key word right now is Indo-Pacific. And as you mentioned, Quad is part of Australia is part of it, United States, Japan, and also India. I think these four nations will play a critical role in determining the role of geopolitics in this particular region. And Malaysia is also part of this region. And the more important thing is that, Melisa, Australia is also part of RCEP, which is the biggest, I would say, trade agreement in terms of GDP and in terms of number of countries. So I think Australia will play a very, very critical role. And as you mentioned just now, if Malaysia invited us to be their strategic partner, a comprehensive strategic partner, meaning that it is Australia view Malaysia has a role to play in this part of the region.
So it's very interesting that the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership has three main pillars. One is economic prosperity, the other is society and technology, and the last is the defense cooperation and regional security dimensions of the strategic partnership. Of those three, what do you think is important in terms of Malaysia-Australia relations? Is it really about the economic prosperity, or is it more about cooperation, especially as the Quad and all these things seem to be predicated on containing China? And what kind of relationship does Malaysia want to a project to contain China?
Yeah, interesting to mention the three pillars of the strategic partnership. It is very similar and parallel to ASEAN, I would say, pillar, which is in terms of politics, social, economy, and also geopolitics. To answer your question, Sharaad, I think the later part or the third framework or the third strategic pillar, which is the defense and also security, will play a critical role in this particular strategic partnership. Even though economy will play a critical role, as you mentioned, Sharaad, China is the main focus here right now. And as we all know, Malaysia and China relationship is very, very cordial. And I think for Australia, trying to gain Malaysia's support, I don't know what they are trying to do, but in order to counter China, it's going to be very interesting because Malaysia has a very cordial relationship with China, not only with China, but also with the United States, which are the two, I would say, nemesis in this particular Indo-Pacific region, Sharaad.
I think it's quite interesting that Biden has kind of cemented this informal grouping of the four maritime democracies. You know, you've got the US, Australia, Japan, as well as India. And I think it's quite interesting that what this could mean for ASEAN in this region if they're talking about dealing or containing China, if I may co-opt Sharaad's phrase, containing China. Are we likely to see China respond in kind? Are we likely to see China respond to the fact that there is this kind of loose alliance of big countries, of powerful countries in Indo-Pacific, and to assert themselves a little bit more? Because in the sense the Quad was set up to kind of challenge China or perceived threats by China within this region. Is China going to respond in kind?
This kind of, as Sharaad mentioned just now, Melisa, containing China has been going on for quite some time already. Talking about Malaysia, we cannot distinguish, we cannot just get rid of the South China Sea issue, for example. And also the latest example of when the DPRK sever the ties with Malaysia. And we know that DPRK has a close relationship with China. And also there's been accusation that Malaysia is too bending on the request on United States to extradite the DPRK individual to the United States. So I think China is well aware of that. And I think Malaysia, being a very small country, as the saying goes, I like to use this saying, Melisa, when elephant fight elephant, we shouldn't be in the middle. I think we should really, Malaysia as a small country cannot be trapped in these two superpowers. And we have demonstrated in terms of South China Sea issue. When 4 months ago, the West Capella issue, when the Chinese Coast Guard was shadowing our Petronas West Capella, and the then President Trump send a warship, I think Malaysia did pretty well to avoid a conflict at that particular time, Melisa.
Azmi, do you think this is a sustainable policy long term, especially as we look at the way China has dealt with other countries in the region, say Singapore, for instance, and they have called out Singapore for its stance of kind of neutrality. They said, you either stand with us or against us, and they've tried to punish Singapore as well. Will we have to make some difficult choices in the years to come between different alliances?
Yeah, talking about the extradition of the DPRK individual, few months back, Beijing did request from Malaysia to extradite a few individuals from the Xinjiang region, the Uyghurs. But Malaysia said there is no, I would say, basis for Malaysia to extradite these individuals. So I think Malaysia did play very well. We need a cordial relationship, not only with China, but also with United States. I think we played this issue to our advantage, Sharaad. I think I'm no shame about that, that we are taking advantage when these two giants, when these two superpowers, especially in South China Sea, they are going against each other. And I see Malaysia as a small country, not to be trapped in the middle, but we are taking advantage of it. So to answer your question, Sharaad, yes, it is very sustainable, and we have proved that over and over again. We have done that, Sharaad.
Okay, so you're saying that you're quite happy with Malaysia's foreign policy at the moment. You're saying we're playing the game right. What are you concerned about when you look at geopolitics at the moment? We've got multiple things happening. You look at Myanmar, you look at the Quad, you look at all these different areas, you're looking at China. Are you concerned that something might tip the scales, that that might be an unforeseen challenge for Malaysia's diplomacy?
Yes, Melisa, it did already happen last 24 hours. If you read the statement from the DPRK Foreign Ministry, the last statement, the last paragraph, they stated that if anything happens between these two countries means DPRK and United States, they will lay the blame on Malaysia, to Malaysia, because extraditing. I think we are being used as a scapegoat. We are a very small country, and I think it has happened already. And I think we have to be very careful there. I think Wisma Putra's statement on this particular issue, some said it's very harsh, some said it's very diplomatic, very soft. But I think if you are not careful, I think the superpowers, including other smaller countries, will make use of the situation and blame Malaysia on their problem, Melisa. That's what I'm really concerned of.
Okay, can we come back to the question of Malaysia-Australia relations? Azmi, this is a country that we've had diplomatic relations since the mid-50s. In 2015, Putrajaya and Canberra elevated ties to what they call a strategic partnership. And now we have this comprehensive strategic partnership signed in January of this year. Why do you think Australia and Malaysia are doing this? I mean, at least from our end, what is the benefit of establishing this kind of ties?
Yes, Sharaad, a few months back, last year, Beijing also elevated our relationship with Kuala Lumpur into a comprehensive, not the kind of word, but strategic partnership, meaning that the elevation of our relationship has been upgraded. Same thing with Australia. And if you look at the three pillars, the economic pillars, the social pillars, and the geopolitical pillars, I think, to answer your question again, I think the geopolitics factor will be very critical of this particular issue. Seen on economic factor, I think we have RCEP. We have FTA with Australia. There shouldn't be any problem. But I think the geopolitics factor, the defense factor, to use your word again, Sharaad, how to contain China. And I think...
Sorry to interrupt you, but I was wondering, could you explain to us, to the layperson, what is the importance of these relationships being upgraded? Is this like going from a girlfriend to being a wife? Is there some kind of benefits in terms of relationships being upgraded geopolitically?
Yes, I think that's a very good analogy, Melisa, when you say that. When they upgraded the relationship, let me use another analogy, Melisa, to satisfy your inquisitive, I guess. Last year, United States and Singapore, they upgraded their relationship in terms of defense, where United States assets, military assets, can use Singapore facilities. So when you have an upgraded relationship, you are in the upper tier. You have the priority, not only on economy, but more importantly on the geopolitics. So I think when Malaysia and Australia have an upgraded relationship, we can have a mutual discussion more fluid, more easily, and an agreement can come to it more easier. I think that's the benefit of having.
Very quickly, yes, Azmi.
Would you say that Australia is a proxy for the US?
Well, Sharaad, okay, I know. Yes, I would say that that's the general feeling in the area of Indo-Pacific and also the Southeast Asia or Asia-Pacific. Yes, Australia is a proxy of the United States. But again, there's nothing wrong with it, Sharaad. Nothing wrong with that.
All right, Azmi, thank you so much for joining us on the show today and sharing those insights, putting to context a little bit the geopolitics of the region. Thank you for your time, Azmi. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Melisa and Sharaad.
That's all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
Thank you so much for watching and good night.
Good night.